Welcome to Main Street Minds with your host, Amish Munshi. This is where industry leaders and seasoned pros share their secrets to success beyond limits. Let's dive in.
Hey, thanks Tim for joining on a very busy week. I know it's a crazy busy time right now. I wanted to welcome you to Main Street Minds, where we help our audience to learn more about successful individuals and how they reached where they are today. So without any delay, I wanted to open up the floor. You can introduce yourself and guide our audience in the right direction.
Nice to meet you, Anish, and great being with you. Tim Zawislack. I live in Coscoff, Connecticut with my wife, 2 dogs and 2 kids, probably not really in that order, but they're constantly running around and they're, in your face. Our kids are a little older now and they kind of leave you alone. But nevertheless, I grew up in the suburban Philadelphia area, went to Villanova University and was major in accounting. And, it was one of these things where I didn't really 100% know what I wanted to do career-wise. Accounting, it's friends of the family that did well with it, looked interesting, and I kind of went that way. As it turns out, used that, minimally throughout my journey, not as such as a subject matter expert in accounting. I can certainly hang in these conversations with, my CFO colleagues. But as it turns out, I grew up in small business, and we had the family had a gift and collectible business, and essentially they had a lot of product lines that they were very, very SKU intensive that we couldn't put out at retail, such as Waterford, Wedgwood, Swarovski, and so on. And basically, what we came up with the idea was essentially this is the early days of the internet. This is around 2000, 2001. We essentially took a very, very broad and deep product assortments and put them online and created a very inelegant, at the time, mechanized catalog, basically. But you were allowing consumers from across the country that didn't necessarily have access to the full breadth and depth of some of these brands to sort of purchase them online and get them in, a week, 10 days, whatever it was at the time. Yeah. And, we were really writing the book. We didn't know this, but with a lot of the brands, we were writing the book on what would become, the drop shipping concept. And I haven't really done that since. But, that was sort of, really becoming, much more of a driving force in terms of, leveraging brands' inventories out at retail. Did that for about 4 or 5 years after school. And then basically hung my own shingle through a little brand we started called the Cozy Pineapple. Self-funded, took that to the, I would say, 5-yard line. Basically same business. We just moved up here to Connecticut with my family. But basically took that to like the 5-yard line to a sale. Unfortunately, it fell apart at sort of the 11th hour. But along the way, ran that successfully and profitably for about 6 years. We bought our house on that, and it was very, very good to us. The only reason I ever really wanted to pivot out of that was because at the time, and this is about 2011, 12, Amazon was becoming the Amazon of today, not the Amazon of books, DVDs, and, very, very sort of limited product selection. The brands were doing this sort of thing themselves. They were becoming direct to consumer, and the whole sort of landscape was changing. So I knew the business model had to evolve, had to change, and I couldn't stay doing that forever. So from there, I had to go get a real job, and as it were, and I joined a small consumer electronics brand in regional in North Jersey called Electronics Expo. And unfortunately, at the time, I joined Electronics Expo. Maybe January of that year. And I'd say by the summer, sadly, they filed Chapter 11. And, it was one of these things like, oh my God, I just got like a job in corporate America, and they filed bankruptcy. As it turns out, and they've long since recovered from that, and they're doing great. And, the same family that's still running that business still has it. And they're survivors. They're just unbelievably great people. Still stay in touch with them today. But essentially what happened, they got really caught up. Consumer electronics industry has undergone a metamorphosis since then. They've, the business at the time really was becoming pricing wise a race to the bottom. So you didn't really have MAP and UPP and some of the things you sort of take for granted today. And this is around 2012. That whole concept it existed, but it wasn't really anything like it is today.
Yeah.
And so that whole industry really sort of turned itself over, during that 2012 timeframe. Circuit City went out of business at that time. And, it was interesting then, the conventional wisdom that was Best Buy was going to pick up all this business from Circuit City. As it turns out, they didn't. And, all business to Circuit City sort of just evaporated out into Costco and Target and everything. So it was just a weird time. Anyway, immediately following that, I was fortunate enough to get a job looking after digital at Rayban.com, which is now part of, Essilor-Luxottica Group. Monumental opportunity. And, sort of that journey was interesting. I had the opportunity to, work with the team and re-platform the website. It kind of needed it. It was a little stale, and it needed a good, revitalization. And while we re-platformed it, we launched a product called Ray-Ban Remix, which was the online custom configurator. So you could pick your Aviator, Wayfarer, or whatever you want, laser engraving, lenses, colors of whatever you want, really true custom product. And we developed that. It was all handmade in central Italy and delivered 2 to 3 business days to here in the US. So total game changer for the brand. I mean, that was a true labor of love by a lot of folks in that organization. I was very, very privileged to be a part of that. Awesome business. And that they've since then really, really sort of, that's helped catapult that business forward to where it is today. From there, at the time, there was a family connection between Luxottica and Brooks Brothers, the son of the Luxottica founder, privately owned Brooks Brothers. And you had some folks going back and forth between the two companies. And my boss at the time at Luxottica was sent to go run Brooks Brothers as president. And he actually took me with him to go help out on brooksbrothers.com. And, Brooks it was just an awesome brand. Great people, amazing business. America's most venerable retailer, 200 plus years old at this point. At the time, there was a spectacular woman running that business, the digital business, sort of by herself. She had a team, but she was sort of single-threaded in charge of it. Got there basically to, leave her run all the marketing side, which was her true love and passion. And then I sort of, helped out with everything else. And the marketing in and of itself was, monumental, sort of as you would imagine thing. Paid social was becoming a thing at the time. It was really, really sort of in that time where Facebook and IG were really starting to become what they are today. It was the early days, but it was you were just trying things. Some worked, some didn't, and so on. And from there, did get a lot of really, really cool stuff built there with the team. I had a stop at the Estee Lauder companies. I was privileged to look over the Origins.com business briefly. And that was a really, really cool exposure to a massive enterprise level sort of setup where you have an army, quite honestly, of people that are working on an entire sort of enterprise level platform for many, many brands in many geographies. And, I had exposure to some of that, but not at that scale. And it was, it was very, very much an education of, how you have to sort of not even go to market, but how you sort of have to build infrastructure and the bulwarks of e-commerce to support lots of brands, lots of languages, lots of currencies, lots of geographies, lots of inventories, customer service, to shipping tender types, and the whole thing. And so that was a fascinating experience. From there, I joined Delta Galil, which you may or may not know them by name. Delta is actually, at the time, they were I believe they were the single source manufacturer for all the panties at Victoria's Secret, ladies activewear at Walmart. So they had a very, very big private label business, but also a very, very diverse licensee, licensor, owned brands, 1P, 3P, you name it. That was a very, very interesting sort of exposure to pretty much in retail and manufacturing, every conceivable go-to-market type and strategy and so on. And the role there was interesting. They had an opportunity to, they had, digital in a lot of geographies across a lot of banners and different sort of, thesis. And the role there was, look, try to go centralize all this as much as possible.
Yeah.
and then define in 3-year horizon, let's say, what could and should this look like. And so we did that, and we built, sort of a team.
Uh,
Okay.
cool. 1, 2, 3, ready.
So following a stop at Estee Lauder companies where I was looking over Origins.com, I joined a company called Delta Galil. You may or may not know them by name. At the time, they were the single source manufacturer for I believe they were single source manufacturer for all the Victoria's Secret panties, for all the Walmart ladies activewear. They were primarily a private label company, but there was an awful lot of other sort of pieces to the business as well. Licensee, licensor, own brands, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, pretty much everything you could imagine. I was very, very fortunate enough to have a lot of exposure to it there. And it's quite complicated. And it was an environment that, you had to be sharp. You had to be, very, very light on your feet and be able to think quickly in terms of, okay, if I do this in this part of the marketplace, what are going to be these sort of downstream effects on other channels, other marketplaces, other sort of environments, and so on. So it was a very, very sort of fast-paced environment, which was awesome. I loved it. And the big thing that the team built there during the time, at the time, this is about 2017 or so, Amazon was at the time on a really, really big private brands kick. And they still have some today. They've really sort of gotten away from a lot of these private brands. They had their sort of moment with it. But the big one of the biggest ones that they did, we launched it. My team, it's called May, M-A-E, which is their women's intimates business. And, we had obviously a big women's intimates business in our building, and Amazon was a customer. So it was, we said, hey, why don't we do something together? You guys run private brands, and let's build something together. And we did, and it was a wild ride. We launched that around Valentine's Day of the 1 year. And by Prime Day, the same year, so like 4 months later, we had some of the top SKUs on Prime Week in that brand. It was amazing. And it was one of these things that everything that could have gone right in those first several months did. And it was just so fun. And, there's nothing like that. And we've got a whole sort of team built around supply chain marketing, go-to-market, branding, and this and that, finance. When that works, there's just nothing like it. And it was a lot of fun. And from there, and they had a lot of own brands as well. So you got to really get under the hood of some very, very cool apparel brands and really understand what makes those tick and, why certain things have to be in terms of influencers and sort of go-to-market strategies there. It was really cool. Fast forward a little bit, I joined, it was an incredibly fun period of my career I joined a company called Jimmy Jazz, which we actually recently exited, not so recent anymore, time flies. But we exited to a strategic company called the Deichmann Group in Germany, and the nameplate in the US is Snipes. So we had 170 brick and mortar. We were the last / biggest Nike and Jordan private retailer. And 30 outdoors in the New York boroughs and 140 up and down the East Coast and in a little bit. And, it was interesting. The role there was very, very much, hey, we've got a very, very unique sort of opportunity where we are one of not that many fish in the sea that are privileged enough to be selling some of these brands, especially Nike and Jordan, Yeezy, Adidas, Polo Ralph Lauren, and some really, really premium stuff that there's just not a lot of distribution on the internet. And you kind of think there is, but then once you start peeling it back, it's actually not. And it was a true privilege to be able to work with these guys because that was a very, very unique, specific set of cultures. And I say set of cultures because the culture in Harlem in the store there was very different than the store in Queens, and the store in Brooklyn, and the store in Detroit, and the store in the Carolinas. I mean, these are very, very different. And, you really, really could not go to market in the stores. And there's a big omnichannel component to this as well. Very big. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of in-store events. We had a lot of musicians, artists, athletes, just sort of different luminaries from across, the whole sort of, industry. It would be in stores. We would do, signings and meet and greets and this and that. And it was wild. It was a really, really fun time.
Yeah.
Where you were able to really mechanize all this stuff digitally. And it was interesting. I'll say COVID was a brutal time for obviously everybody.
Oh, yeah.
But this was in that sort of time period. We'd actually replatformed a pretty, I would say, venerable old sort of DIY website. We replatformed into a Shopify Plus environment right around Valentine's Day of 2020, and week later, like, the world fell apart. And while we were doing it, we were building a pretty robust omni-channel component. So ship from store, buy online, pick up in store, all that stuff. And it was one of these things that, we developed that concurrently with the new platform, but it was one of these things that you were a little lucky, and, in life, you kind of make your own luck, but we had a little bit of good fortune there as well, because we had done that. And, a lot of our competitors, bigger ones too, didn't really have this sort of omni-channel fulfillment capability that we did. And, we were really, really blessed because you had our core customer, unfortunately, we all were locked up in their houses, but they were home watching the Michael Jordan documentary, which ESPN was running at the time, free money from the federal government, and at home buying sneakers on the phone. So we were sort of fortunate there that we had developed a very, very robust mechanism to support that business in terms of the front end of the website, but also the back end in terms of fulfillment, in terms of omni-channel capabilities, where you knew where your inventory was. And had we not done that, I mean, we obviously would have stayed in business, but we wouldn't have been able to get as much stuff to as many people as we did. And you sort of, in that moment, you start having like these big existential conversations with your team, with yourself. You realize after a little while of doing this, after, it's whatever, 4 a.m, and you're exhausted, it kind of hits you that, like, you're providing an outlet for a lot of these people that are just like, they can't do anything else but, glued to the TV, whatever, and then like buy stuff and hope it shows up. And so you start to realize, like, oh my God, like, this is a very, very special thing. And Jimmy Jazz was a very, very special place. I can't overstate that. Jimmy Kesbury and his team, way before I got there, I didn't invent this. The people that worked in the organization, stores, the corporate office, were very, very much of the locations where they worked. So, they eat, work, slept, live, worship, play, whatever, in these locations, in these neighborhoods. And Jimmy and his family and the organization gave an awful lot back that no one will ever know, in terms of, like, basketball courts and turkeys and hams and backpacks and books, and I could just go on. Stuff people will never know that the organization did, Jimmy did, that it really, really endeared us to the communities. And I'm circuitously getting back to COVID with that. Summer of 20 was horrible on so many levels. We had 170 brick and mortar. I believe we had 2 doors that had problems as far as looting and this and that. And because the nature of what Jimmy and his team and we built in terms of, like, being of the community and of our customer, because of what we had done over the last many, many years, this went from, like, father to son and all that. It was that kind of thing. Like, the father went there when he was a kid. He took his kid there when he had back to school and all that. And because of that sort of relationship with the community, we had lamb's blood over almost all of our doors, when our next door neighbors on the streets were, like, in rough shape. You could go problem, Jimmy Jazz, nothing, problem. It was, I've never seen anything like it. And, it was one of these things, and I wanted to spend a moment on that because it was a privilege to be part of that. I certainly didn't invent it. God knows I didn't. But it was a privilege to just be a part of that and watch that play out in terms of being able to speak authentically and first of all, understand your customer and to be able to speak authentically with him or her.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a lesson that you can't get in an MBA, you can't read about it in a white paper. You sort of have to just experience it because it washes over you like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So very, very special.
Are you still with Jimmy, or like are you what are you doing right now?
Well, so we exited, so we sold to the Dykeman Group. We all still stay. It's funny. We all still stay in touch. Like all of us still, they're tight. There's a group that we love each other. It's nice. And it was like that when we were all there, and it was interesting because human resources is a very, very important component of every company, but everybody sort of had their own like piece of that. Like there, you were in finance, you were looking out, making sure that the marketing guy or the supply chain guy, you were all sort of looking out to making sure everybody was doing like the right thing, and it was unique. And so to that, we all still stay in touch. It's going up 5 years later now, and it's like, wow, it's crazy. But we exited. We sold to the Dykeman Group, and from there I joined Conair, which was not the same thing. It's a larger company, it's a multinational thing, but similar in nature to where it was founder led up until the founder's death. And then even following that, post sale to private equity, it was led by a gentleman who had been in the organization for 40 odd years. So, he wasn't the founder, but he was incredibly instrumental in getting it to where it was, today. And brought on by him and PE it was a similar role. Like, hey, here's a lot of disparate digital stuff across multiple geographies, multiple banners, multiple go-to-market strategies, channels, this and that. Conair owns namesake brand, Cuisinart, Scunsy, Waring, and Inglis, and a few others, but those are the core businesses. And so the role there was, sort of a larger sort of role than I've had, but it was the same sort of like dance steps, if you will. Okay, a lot of brands, a lot of strategies. Okay, you got to have, channel management, strategy, single threaded all the way through. What are you going to do with each brand? How's that touch the marketplace and this and that? So, there we brought a lot of these brands to life digitally, and it was interesting. There was teams there, obviously pre-me. It's a 60-year-old company, but at the time there wasn't somebody to come in and say, look, this is how the world is doing sort of Amazon or D2C or whatever. Like, let's try to sort of, work backwards from XYZ things that the rest of the industry is doing. And let's go and try to like really, really, animate these brands, digitally. One of the things that I'm most proud of there, we replatformed, I think 6 sites during my time there, something like that. But the most interesting one was Cuisinart. And Cuisinart is this awesome brand that's sort of, one of these great brands, that invented the category. There were food processors, but Cuisinart was like the first big one that really sort of defined the category and gone on to do tons and tons and tons of other categories and things. But we, over the last, 2 years or so, we were under a revitalization for the Cuisinart brand, culminating in new site, new agency of record, new sort of market messaging, and so on and so forth. We relaunched the brand with It's a Work of Cuisinart, and that had great utility across many, many different product lines that they sell.
Yeah, and so like how like from all of such a wide varied experience, how do you manage to like collect all of this into kind of like how do you manage to like get all of this put together and like apply it in what you're looking to do next?
Well, you really have to, in terms of what's next, look, the opportunity to really help some of these brands in terms of, we have great bones. Maybe we're old, maybe, there's great roots in the marketplace, whatever, but it just needs The brand might need some, a little bit of, reanimation energy in terms of bringing it to market the
Mm-hmm.
way that lots of brands are today. It's
Yeah.
interesting. You have to be in our space. You really, really humility. I'm a big believer in that. There's brands out there, and I'm not talking about Timo and Shein, but there's like major, major players sitting on Amazon right now that are pecking away at a lot of legacy brands. And the legacy brands, a lot of them don't even know what's happening. And if they do, a lot of them don't know sort of why or who's doing it or what the dynamic is. So, the opportunity to say, look, here's what these upstarty brands are doing. Here's how they're doing it. Some of it you can reverse engineer it, but some of it you can't do, right? Like if you're a big, I don't know, Fortune 500, whatever, you've got a cost structure and a margin structure that is going to be very, very different than a very, very small startup that's
Mm-hmm.
Asia in many cases, shipping direct from Asia into the US. Their cost
Mm-hmm.
structure is radically different than a
Mm-hmm.
Fortune 1000, Fortune 500. So you can't beat them at their own game in many cases. But
Mm-hmm.
there are things you can do. You can tell your brand story. You can and do that the right way. And you can, if you've got great teams, great agencies, because that's just as crucial. You can create from a media perspective, you can create a rising tide that raises digital ship as well as your retail brick and mortar ship.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating, if you wire the stuff up properly, what you can sort of do there.
Yeah, and among the existing established brands, like what do you recommend them right now? Like, what's the right mix of retail versus online versus is retail still shrinking, or is it still the most important part of a business?
So it's a great question. I mean, here's what I'll tell you: 70% of every dollar is still done at retail.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the digital guy. I'm a digital
Yeah.
guy. I'm saying this. So
Yeah.
you're sort of kidding yourself if you're sitting in like a head of e-commerce seat or a chief digital officer seat or whatever it is. You're kind of kidding yourself to say that you are, the loudest voice at the table. You should be the loudest voice at the table. You should be a very important voice at the table. You're certainly not the only one, and you're never going to be the only one, right? Like
Yeah.
Walmart, Target, Costco. These are tens and tens of thousands of points of distribution.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Nike, and I didn't work for Nike, but I worked adjacent, with them at my time at Jimmy Jazz. They spent years basically leaning really, really, really hard into D2C, and D2C meaning Nike.com, Nike apps, Nike stores, physical stores. And on paper, it was probably the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
The reality of what happened, though, is they swung that pendulum literally all the way to the other side. And what they did, unfortunately for them, fortunately for others, what they did, they opened the door wide to On, Hoka, Addy coming back, Puma coming back, New Balance really coming back. They're doing well. That would not have been possible had Nike sort of walked away, had Nike not walked away from these thousands of doors, big and small, by the way, like community doors they walked away from. And they look again on paper, it was probably the sort of the right direction to go.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they should have gone that hard. And what you're seeing is that they're sort of reopening some of these doors now. Because to your point, should it just be digital or should you focus on retail? They focused on D2C almost exclusively, and they lost a lot of just voice out in the world. And there's not enough internet in the world to e-commerce shopping in the world to sort of offset that.
Yeah, especially like things that people like to like touch, feel, see before they buy it, right?
Yeah.
If I'm buying a phone, it's the same phone, right? It doesn't matter where it comes from. But a shoe, like furniture is another thing, right? Like I want to feel it. I want to sit on the couch and see, does it fit me? Yeah. So that makes all the sense. So what does your next venture, what would motivate you? Like what is it that would be an ideal thing that would enable you to kind of succeed in what you're trying to do on the next mission that you're doing?
Look, I mean, look, I love working in private equity. I love public companies because, especially in PE, you got to move fast and you sort of have to go in knowing your category, your space, your channels, your customers. You kind of have to go in. You can't learn on the job. You're going to fly out of it. But you have to go in and really, really have a very, very clear point of view on their sort of place in the world, whatever the portfolio company is, or the PE is, or the public company. What is their place in the world? Who is their real competition? Not who they want to think their competition is, and that's a whole other story. But who their actual competition is, and what are you going to do about it? And then where are you in terms of like category share? Shockingly, in the biggest marketplace in the world, which is Amazon, digital marketplace in the world, which is Amazon, there's big brands that have no idea what their category share is or what the TAM is in the category. Total market. You ask some of these guys, like, well, how big is the TAM? I don't know. How you doing? So an opportunity where, look, you've got a great TAM, meaningful. You've got decent category share, and then really, really great bones and great team. All of this is not possible without an awesome team. If you don't have great people, forget it. But an opportunity where, look, I can go in and you've got a brand that, really, really just needs to get pulled forward into the future. Not just as it concerns digital, but I think it's an omni-channel sort of exercise where you're investing on Bosch or Reacher or something on Amazon Prime Video. Amazon Prime Video and YouTube, those two things have been absolute game changers in terms of marketing as it concerns driving foot traffic to retail. Digital, obviously, but if you're wiring up your Prime Video and YouTube marketing properly, you're going to see a really good shot in the arm out, on the weekends out at Costco and Target. And so on, Walmart, of course. So, an opportunity where I can go in from a digital perspective, really help with an omni-channel organization.
Yeah. So, and are you do you want to be more on the strategy level or more on the financing and kind of the investment aspects of it, or what would you be most interested in?
My ideal is working on the strategy side most of the time with that team, and then helping figure out execution and tactics and so on with the team in concert with a big set of commercial goals. That's my ideal. Sure. Some of the time sitting with the finance guys, the M&A guys, and so on and so forth. Finance guys, because at the end of the day, all of this is pay for play. Like this whole channel digital is pay for play. So consequently, to this day, every single CFO I've ever had, like, we still talk because you just become, I don't know, confidants, friends, frenemy, whatever you want to call it, and you just go out like cat and dog because, like, if you're in my seat, you're always begging for money. You're never having enough money. So. It's just a question of like how much, trust you can sort of build with that function, finance side. And then, sort of adjacent to that on the M&A side, there's a lot of companies for sale today. A lot of companies. A lot of companies got bought during COVID. They got bought when interest rates were low and multiples were high. The opposite sort of impact right now. So there's a lot of things out there for sale. And the best things are the ones that aren't really for sale. So spending time with the M&A guys to understand what's a great complement to the of things that we currently have. What looks good on a prospectus, but like, hey, let me tell you, under the covers, I can sort of pick apart this stuff. This is really not so good. So that would be a piece as well.
Makes sense. Yeah. So before we depart, like, what's the best way for somebody to reach you?
A website I stood up over the last few months, timzawislack.com. All my sort of contact stuff is there. but please, reach out. And, a piece of advice, and I think we were talking before, this piece of advice on how do you sort of get into this and do it. I've been very, very blessed over the last several years with a lot of really, really cool roles. I would never have gotten here to lead these great teams and organizations without proverbially picking up a lot of pieces of paper and paper clips and whatever off the floor when nobody else was going to do it, and candidly nobody was really looking.
Yeah.
I've been very, very fortunate to be exposed to every facet basically of this business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, the folks that have this, like, we have 2 kids and they say I'm studying for the test. You're not studying for the test, you're studying for knowledge. And if you go into this industry or any other just to do your job, you're gonna do your job and you're gonna be fine and you'll have a nice life and whatever. But like, if you're doing it because you love it, because you're curious and you have a great sense of humility that, like, you know what, no matter what I did, there's 5 guys in this industry that did 30 times more. I can probably learn from him or her.
Yeah.
You gotta be sort of just hungry to just learn. And by the way, another one, I've been joining lots of, I'm on a few advisory boards and this and that. I'm on a lot of calls recently. And as you would imagine, big subject is AI. AI is amazing. AI is awesome. I'll tell you a little anecdote I heard at a dinner a few months back. They gave a year and change ago, the then current version of ChatGPT, they gave it the New York State bar exam. Year and change ago, ChatGPT got a 10 out of 100 on the bar exam. They gave it a year later, 90.
Sweet. Yeah.
So now this stuff is moving faster than I think anybody can imagine. And, while I don't think we're all going to be cyborgs in 3 years, I don't believe that. I don't know how it's going to happen. But I do think it's incredibly, incredibly important for anybody listening to your podcast that they really, really immerse themselves in that. Number one, but number two, realize that AI is only as good as the people in your organization who are going to go do something with it.
Yeah.
That it all comes down to people. And if you've got people in your organization, look, AI should be the number one thing you should do with AI is to use it to take away the no joy jobs, right? So have it do that, and it'll happily do it.
Yeah.
Profit, chat, all that stuff.
Yeah, even the learning ability, right? I was just speaking with somebody yesterday, and they said they are developing something where we are able to speak with our pets in a language that the pet will understand. And the AI is able to do that translation. So real-time communication, actual collaboration, and things that we can speak. And with it's not even with humans. It could be with anyone.
That's wild. It might make it so I can communicate with my children after all these years. I don't know.
It's going to be amazing. Yeah. Sweet, sounds great. So thanks for taking the time on a very busy week to jump on the podcast and be a guest over here. Thanks.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Main Street Minds. Want to share your journey with our audience? Head over to mainstreetmindspodcast.com/guest to apply.